What is good, my friends? Joe Passarelli here. Gonna have a bunch of content today. I know everybody's talking about the Vince McMahon podcast with Steve Austin, which transpired on the WWE Network last night. Look for a review on that from me as well. Admittedly, I still have to listen to it. I just got home from work. Working third shift, but I will have that out today. Also, check out the Wrestling Throwdown channel. Myself and Haley Imes gonna be reviewing the 3-hour Raw last night, the highlights, the lowlights, the news, everything that came out of Monday Night Raw's broadcast on the USA Network last night. Of course, the topic that was brought up, and I can't wait to actually hear it. I've seen the transcription on Facebook, but I can't wait to actually hear it. The elephant, or the punk, in the room, if you will, the CM Punk situation was discussed on the Vince McMahon Steve Austin podcast, so stay tuned to that. So anyway, as I flip back my notes to the page, I have all the CM Punk notes. Certainly it was a very revealing podcast, folks. Almost a year in the making, as it was the end of January 2014, right after the Royal Rumble, and CM Punk started his hiatus. And really, he brought up a lot of interesting stuff, and I want to go by it bullet point by bullet point as I had written it down. One thing that kind of irked me from this, again, I am a CM Punk fan, I will give him credit on certain things, but I will state my opinion on everything that I felt warranted an opinion. He took credit for the Shield, which that kind of irked me. He said, oh yeah, the Shield was my idea. I don't think anyone knew what the Shield was quite going to be. People knew there was going to be a few guys getting called up, and this Ryback situation needed an injection of something to change it up, because clearly they weren't going to put Ryback over for the belt. And they didn't want him to get beaten clean by Punk, so they had to figure out something after the Brad Maddox screw job. And originally they were actually going to call them up in Hell in the Cell and have the Shield interfere in the Hell in the Cell match at Ryback, as opposed to the rematch at Survivor Series at Ryback 2012. But he talks about that, saying how he originally wanted Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and of course his buddy Cassius Ohno, Chris Hero. WWE wasn't feeling Chris Hero. They wanted Leaky Roman Reigns to be part of it. Punk was fine with it. Because originally, the Shield was supposed to be CM Punk's faction. I thought that was very fascinating. But I did think it was a little arrogant. Not that he's ever not arrogant. But I thought it was a little much that he was proverbially taking credit for the Shield. Even though he did, give credit to all three members of the Shield and how great they're doing now. He talks about when he was supposed to walk Chael Sonnen down, I think when Chael was fighting John Bones, the main event, a UFC fight, and people would have been talking about the WWE champion walking down with Chael Sonnen, but WWE nixed that idea, even though Punk asked permission, like a good soldier. WWE declined, and then I think Punk said not too far later, I think a week or two later even, Triple H walked Floyd Mayweather down, obviously boxing, UFC, two different things, and WWE swears that they're not in competition with UFC, but they gave Alberto Del Rio and CM Punk non-competes with UFC. Quite interesting indeed. And Triple H, that's going to be a theme on this. He trashes Ryback. We've all seen the quotes by now. He's dumb as fuck, quote unquote. And, he intentionally broke his ribs when he kicked him, and he gorilla pressed him and missed the table, and he was supposed to put him to the table, and he was green, and Punk hated working with him. Certainly, no love lost there between Ryan Reeves and Phil Brooks whatsoever. He talks about 12 rounds too, and how he was originally supposed to get the role in that. However, it coincided with the European tour. This was when he was champion, and he talked to Triple H about it, said, hey, I think the Euro tour is that, stretch. What are we going to do? Randy Orton ended up getting the role in 12 rounds. Punk disparaged the WWE movies anyway, calling them shitty. But he certainly, I feel, was butthurt that he did not even get a phone call by Hunter. And this may have truly started the heat with Hunter. Of course, he also talks about when Punk was white hot in the early part of 2012. 2011 rather, the early part of 2011 when he fought Triple H at the Night of Champions pay-per-view, Triple H fighting for his job as the GM of Raw at that point. And Triple H went over on Punk, who was white hot at the time. I was rooting for Punk hardcore, rocking my Nexus Punk shirt, watching the pay-per-view, was very shocked Punk didn't go over, and Punk never forgot that moment. You'll see that come up again, and certainly Punk was very upset, almost Bret Shawn-esque. Very ironic there with Punk playing the role of Bret. Very interesting indeed. He talked about his 2013 heel turn, how he knew that would cut into his merch. He was outselling Cena, despite not really main eventing, being the champion. He was still outselling Cena. He knew a heel turn would cut his merch sales, and it did. Didn't really talk about the Paul Heyman pairing. I thought we'd hear more on that. He talks about dropping the title to The Rock, how he felt like that was not best for business. He gave 2 suggestions, maybe doing a triple threat with Rock, Cena, and Punk to main event WrestleMania, which again would have got that, taken care of. He also spoke on maybe dropping it to Undertaker, which I felt like that was a possibility, and that actually would have been day 500 at WrestleMania, and they would have main evented by default, even though he mentions that Vince McMahon and Triple H both said that that was the true main event of that WrestleMania. Undertaker and Punk, by far the best match. Either way, Punk wasn't satisfied. He looks at it, you main event WrestleMania when you close the show, and a lot of people look at that, so he started talking about that. Of course, the internet had speculated on that one for months. He talked about money. That was a big concern with the WWE Network approaching. He knew funds were going to get cut. They owed him royalties. I don't want to get into all the financial ins and outs, but he was certainly not happy with his money situation. One of the guys he really dogged on was the Doc Amon. I think Chris is his first name. Chris Amon, who I actually heard with Dolph Ziggler on Jericho's podcast not too recently. And he seemed like a chill guy. Talked about cutting a hair off Jericho's foot, made Jericho feel so much better. But this gave rise to the real controversy of this podcast with Colt Cabana, talking about how the doctor wouldn't cut out what ended up turning into a bad staph infection in his back. It was Mercer. He could have died from it. Doc Amon refused to cut it out after Punk imploring him for months and months. Colt Cabana even asked, do you feel like they had, why wouldn't they cut it out? And Punk had no answer. He just was like, he's just lazy and stupid. So, that was Phil Brooks' thoughts on that. Like I said, really was not feeling Doc Amon. Definitely went out of his way to trash him. They didn't give him much time off. They finally did after he lost to Undertaker. And it only was 2 months off. He talked about that's when he really, rediscovered his passion for hockey, going to all those Blackhawk games when they ended up playing the Bruins and winning the Bruins. Talked about how he wished he could be in Boston when they beat the Bruins for the Stanley Cup, but he had returned by that point. He talked about the Royal Rumble, and here's where it starts getting really good. The last night he was there, he talked about getting a concussion pretty early in the Rumble and rolling out, telling Doc Amon, and Doc Amon pretty much, what do you want me to do about it? Punk was not happy about that, and then they said that Kane was going to eliminate him early. Punk, being the true worker and patriarch of the business that he is, was like, no, I'm not getting eliminated early. Eliminate me when I'm supposed to get eliminated. Well, they still eliminated him rather early, and we saw the lasting image of CM Punk, or the last image, rather, of CM Punk in the WWE, him getting choke slammed through a table by Kane. By the way, he said he had no heat with Kane, a.k.a. Glenn Jacobs. Loved working with him, but that particular storyline, he felt like they had already worked ad nauseum throughout the years, and there was nothing to gain. He said he would have rather worked with Curtis Axel, or a younger guy like that, than Kane at that point, which I thought was quite interesting. Indeed. Then comes his final exit. Certainly, the meeting with the infamous meeting now with Triple H and Vince. Vince in tears, pretty much giving Punk a hug, saying your family. Triple H really not speaking up. He wasn't even going to be in the room, and Punk was like, you might as well be in here too. Punk was honest and forthright with Hunter, said that he had heat with Hunter about him not putting him over at the Night of Champions pay-per-view a few years ago, and that was what was best for business then when he was white hot. Can't say I disagree with him at that point. And that he had no interest in working Triple H. He did divulge that he was going to go over on Triple H at WrestleMania, but he said he had no interest in working working Triple H at WrestleMania, that Triple H was the one who needed to wrestle him. He didn't need to wrestle the game. And I found that quite interesting. I don't know if I totally agree with it, because I do think Triple H, you know, he's a legend. Say what you want about him. Wrestling him is a big mark. I mean, look at Daniel Bryan wrestled him, parlayed it into a title shot, ended up being really his WrestleMania. And he spoke about Bryan as well in that meeting, how it was Bryan's year, and, you know, originally it was still Batista and Orton penciled in for the main event of Mania. He said that'd be craptastic. Daniel Bryan, it's his year, he should be in there. Obviously, that ended up happening. He talked about how Batista should go heel, him being a babyface was stupid, and that him and Dave Batista were actually tight, and still are, and that Dave Batista has been to his house in recent months, so anybody who thinks Phil Brooks and Dave Batista aren't tight, they got another thing coming. Certainly, they are still friends, and they have no heat with each other, and Batista actually agreed with some of the stuff that Punk was saying about how Dave should have been heel, and all this other stuff. And then, of course, a few months after his departure from the company, Triple H called him 2 days before his wedding, or texted him rather 2 days before his wedding. CM Punk was like, look, I'm getting married, we're going on a honeymoon, and I will be in contact with you, and I am interested in coming back. He didn't necessarily say that, but he seemed open-minded about the prospect of maybe coming back. And here's where the heat really got, you know, exposed, where he talks about he was sent his termination papers on his wedding day. Folks, that was a craptastic move. This was 2 days after he spoke with Triple H. Now, I can understand, like, Triple H was probably like, look, we're reaching out to you, and this is the response. Like, alright, fuck you. And hence, his termination papers being mailed to him on his wedding day with Miss April Brooks, a.k.a. AJ Lee, and he talked about that. He talked about money squabbles and having an old check from 2013 that hadn't been cashed, and they wouldn't assign him cut him a new check. They wouldn't send him the royalties they owed him. Talked about the legal situation. Didn't go into full detail, but he did say he got everything he wanted and more from that, so it seemed like they did settle. Talked about the merch or lack thereof on the WWE.com. Colt Cabana joke said that you won't see him on the WWE Network, not that he was on there in the first place. And if I could for a second, I'd like to give Colt Cabana a lot of credit. Obviously, CM Punk was not paid to do this interview. He did it with his friend to give us, the wrestling fans, finally the answers that we deserve. We did deserve to hear the answers as to why he up and left the WWE. He was a beloved character. The fans did help make him who he was, although the people who say, oh, I helped you buy your house, I think they need to chillax. But coming today, I will also review the Vince McMahon podcast with Austin, the Austin podcast, which he interviewed Vince and Kenny McMahon. That will be later today. It is Tuesday, December 2nd, 2014. You can check out the Wrestling Throwdown channel a little bit later today, as myself and Haley Imes will go through the Raw rundown on the Wrestling Throwdown YouTube extravaganza. So make sure you subscribe to that. Subscribe to Duo Dreamer. Duo Dream 2K26 rather. Subscribe to Chris Soriano. And make sure you check out myself, the Jazzman, and Immortal Mike Sorkin on the Strike Zone this Thursday, ricradio.org, 8 to 10 p.m. You can tune in at ricradio.org, www, or 90.7 WXIN FM if you're in the Providence or Rhode Island area. And you can call in at 414-568-787, 414-569-9946. And don't forget, support our boy Immortal Mike Sorkin. If you're looking for seats for WrestleMania or the Super Bowl or a plethora of other events, go to immortalseats.com and he's got your hookup. Holla if you hear me. This is Joe Passarelli, best in the world. Finally, we got some clarification. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on this channel today. The podcast review of Vincent Kennedy McMahon and Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the Raw review of myself and Haley Imes in the Wrestling Throwdown. Joe Passarelli, subscribe.